So the topic in this edition of Sales Ki Pathshala is sales closing techniques. In my earlier video, you have already understood the 7 challenges towards sales closing. And now we quickly move on to understand that if we have circumvented those 7 challenges of sales closing, then how do I apply my sales closing technique to the whole program? So I have just put my PowerPoint on sales closing techniques on the screen. Please confirm to me if all of you can see the correct PPT on the chat box, please. All right, thank you so much. So sales closing techniques. How do you convert customers' desire into action? क्योंकि हम सेल्स के उस कगार पे खड़े हैं जहां कस्टमर की डिजायर तो हो गई है, अब उसके अंदर तमन्ना तो जाग गई है कि मैं प्रोडक्ट खरीदना चाहता हूं, लेकिन किस टर्म्स एंड कंडीशन पे खरीदूं, मेरे अंदर की डिजायर एक्शन कैसे बन जाए। और अगले 40 मिनट तक हम इसी टॉपिक पे डिस्कस करेंगे कि व्हाट आर द वेरियस टेक्निक्स ऑफ सेल्स क्लोजिंग। फैंटास्टिक। इस टेक्निक को समझने के पहले ये थ्योरी को समझना बहुत जरूरी है कि 100% क्लोजिंग कभी भी सेल्स में हो नहीं पाएगा। दुनिया का सबसे धुरंधर सेल्समैन भी 100% सेल्स क्लोजिंग नहीं कर पाता है। सो देयर इज अ स्लोगन, सम विल सम नॉट। कुछ लोग आपसे खरीदेंगे, कुछ लोग नहीं खरीदेंगे। सो व्हाट नेक्स्ट प्लीज। सो you can never do 100% closing. So there is no technique in the world which can guarantee 100% closing to you. But you should not feel frustrated with it. Some will buy, some will not buy. So what? Move on to the next one. All right. So I start this program with a disclaimer that no technique can guarantee 100% results in sales closings. But if you see at this logo here, the next, ये next logo में ऊपर की ओर एक arrow जाती है, और ये next word जो है ये बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है सेल्समैन के लिए। Otherwise, I know a lot of salespeople who feel so frustrated because they were not able to close an order that they do not even attempt for the next order. And that is harakiri, my friends. All right. So let's move on to the first technique of sales closing. And this first technique of sales closing is known as Ben Franklin close. अब ये कौन साहब है बेन फ्रैंकलिन? दोस्तों, जैसे हमारे भारतीय इंडियन रुपीज में महात्मा गांधी का फोटो रहता है, वैसी यूएस डॉलर के बिल के नोट के ऊपर जिसका फोटो रहता है, उनका नाम है बेन फ्रैंकलिन। और बेन फ्रैंकलिन ने ये थ्योरी दी है क्लोजिंग की। इनका कहना है कि किसी भी क्लोजिंग सिनेरियो पे देयर आर प्रोज एंड कॉन्स। इनका कहना है कि बायर के पास अगर 50% ट्रुथ होता है तो सेलर के पास भी 50% ट्रुथ होता है, एंड दिस इज द वर्स्ट सिनेरियो। इवन इन द वर्स्ट सिनेरियो द सेलर हैज 50% truth and the buyer has 50% truth. In better scenarios the seller can have more percent truth. ऐसा कभी नहीं होगा कि buyer will have 100% truth and seller will have 0% truth, क्योंकि तब तो फिर मार्केट ही नहीं होगी ना, फिर तो आप मार्केट में जा ही नहीं पाओगे। मसला मुद्दा यहाँ पे ये है कि किसका 50% भारी है, and that's what the Ben Franklin clause talks about, that are you able to draw the pros and cons map of the scenario in a way that you are able to prove to your customer that your pros are stronger than your cons. यानी कि आपका पलड़ा भारी है। मैं मानता हूं कि ग्राहक के पास ऐसे 2-3 पॉइंट हैं जो मेरे हक में नहीं है, लेकिन मेरे पास भी ऐसे 6-7 पॉइंट हैं जो मेरे हक में हैं। और ये जो बैलेंसिंग सिनेरियो है, इस सिनेरियो को स्टडी करते हुए जब हम सेल्स क्लोजिंग की तरफ आगे बढ़ते हैं तो इस टेक्निक को कहा जाता है बेन फ्रैंकलिन क्लोज। लिखते जाइए, मैं आपके साथ पावरपॉइंट शेयर करूंगा और बाद में आखिरी में क्वेश्चन आंसर लूंगा जिसमें कि वी विल चेक आउट कौन सी टेक्निक कहां पे लगाई जा सकती है। Alright, Ben Franklin close. Can you go to the chat box and write BF so that I know you have picked up my words? Ben Franklin close, BF. Okay, guys. Okay, I see some question there. Harsh, how to sell Audi to Maruti owner by value? No, Harsh, there is no point in trying to sell an Audi to a Maruti owner by value. It could be possible that the Maruti owner also has a need and pain and risk for Audi, but that needs to be studied. Okay, all right. So a lot of you have understood Ben Franklin close. Let me move on to the next scenario. The next type of closing technique is called the assumptive close. Now, assumptive close is for all good customers. Towards the end of the sales closing, you realize that the customer is already fully convinced and you don't need to push the sale. You don't need to further progress your sale. You can go ahead on the assumption that the client is already sold, and you start asking those questions to the customer, which is assumed that order is closed. आप sales order processing के सवाल पूछने लगते हैं. सर डिलीवरी कब लेना है, ट्रेनिंग कहाँ लोगे, ऑनलाइन लोगे कि ऑफलाइन लोगे, 1 साल की वारंटी लोगे कि 3 साल की वारंटी लोगे, वगैरह वगैरह. तो ये कुछ ऐसे सवाल हैं जो तब पूछे जाते हैं जब ऑर्डर क्लोज हो जाती है. तो एजम्पटिव क्लोज टेक्निक का कहना है कि जब आपको मानसिक रूप से लगे किसी सिनेरियो में कि कस्टमर क्लोज है, तो बजाय उसके कि कस्टमर को पूछना कि सर क्या आपको प्रोडक्ट दूं, आप उनको बदले में एजम्पटिव क्लोज की तरफ लेके जाते हैं और सेल्स ऑर्डर प्रोसेसिंग के सवाल पूछते हैं. सिंपल. Normally, assumptive close happens only in 20% cases, but इसको जानना जरूरी है कि ऐसा भी होता है. ऐसा नहीं है कि ऐसा बिल्कुल नहीं होता. So, assumptive close is the second closing. Can you please write in the chat box AC for me, please? Assumptive close. All right, very good. So, friends, my colleague Charles has put up a feedback form. Please cut paste that form and store it somewhere, because at the end of the program, you'll have to fill the form. So we have finished assumptive close, and now we move on to the third closing techniques, and this is what I call the gotcha closing. Gotcha is a word in English which says ki got it man. जब आप किसी को wrong foot पे पकड़ लेते तो आप क्या बोलते हैं? पकड़ लिया, got you. Similarly, जब हम sales closing के सिनेरियो में रहते हैं और जब हम अपने ग्राहक को उसकी दुखती रग को पकड़ लेते हैं और उसकी दुखती रग को पकड़ के दबाते हैं, hold on to the pain area of the customer and close. So this technique is known as the gotcha closing, and the gotcha closing pre-assumes that you have done a wonderful risk assessment of the client, and after having done the risk assessment of the client, you actually create a TINA point. There's something called TINA. There is no alternative. So gotcha closing ka one of the outcome is that you are able to create a TINA point, which means there is no alternative, and you go ahead with the closing. All right. So gotcha closing, Tia Subramaniam, can you correlate this with the question that you asked? In high ticket cases, you cannot do emotional closing. So in high ticket cases, it is important that you must identify the risk at the customer's end. What is the risk if the customer does not buy your ERP solution? And you have to monetize that risk. The customer has to agree to that risk. And then you say, gotcha closing, man. अब आपकी risk मैंने identify कर लिया. अब मेरे सिवाय आपका कोई दूसरा चारा नहीं है. I have reached the TINA point. There is no alternative. Now the only thing that is remaining is closing your order. So Tia Subramaniam, please confirm on the chat box whether you are able to connect gotcha closing with high ticket sales or not. Okay, all right, Tia, I'm waiting for your feedback. Meanwhile, let's move to the next form of closing, friends. The next form of closing is the if-then closing. A lot of times it happens that in the course of a sales process, the customer has a lot of if-then. If your product goes bad and if I'm out of my warranty, then will you still service my product? If I have paid warranty, but if there is a defect in a part which is not covered under warranty, will you still cover it? So do you correlate the if-then scenarios? There are a lot of if-then scenarios. The other day I had gone to the shop to buy a refrigerator, and there was another customer who was arguing with the salesperson द सेल्स पर्सन सेड कि सर रेफ्रिजरेटर की 2 साल की वारंटी है, लेकिन इस वारंटी में कंप्रेसर कवर्ड नहीं है. And the customer was arguing with the if-then closing that if you do not cover the compressor in the warranty, then I will not buy the refrigerator from you. Now, this is known as the if-then scenario. And to be able to cater to the if-then scenario, you need to prepare a negotiation exchange kit. So what is the closing technique? So when the customer says that, Sanjay, please give me a 20% discount, I don't tell him I'll not give you a discount. I instead say that, okay, if you want me to look at the option of giving you 20% discount, then can you give me an extended warranty for the next 5 years? Do you see? I have balanced his if with my then. And if he agrees to my then I'll agree to his if. This technique of balancing the if of the customer with the then of your side is called if-then closing. All right, very interesting. And then we move towards the next form of closing, which is what I call the engineered close. And this is the toughest closing technique. In fact, we say that people, the salespeople who are able to master the engineered closing is a very smart sales closer. Now, what is an engineered closure? Engineered closing is normally done with very tough customers, and we also call it tactical maneuver. Now, what is this tactical maneuver? What is this engineered closing? You know, there are customers who will pose a lot of questions for you. They will normally show a lot of knowledge about their product, and normally it happens in high ticket sales. It also happens in B2B sales. It also happens in high value products. So customer is very knowledgeable and he puts a lot of knowledge-based questions on the table. The customer is bound out and out to prove that you don't know much and I know more than you, so you please listen to me and I'll not listen to you. I am sure you understand the scenario which I'm talking about. Now, in such a scenario, we follow the engineered sales closing technique. And what does it mean? Ask reverse questions. Now, this technique of asking reverse questions is very interesting. If I want my customer to tell me that the price of my product is value for money, and if I ask a straight question that, sir, do you think my product is value for money? I'm sure he will say no, right? Or if it's very good, he'll say, I really don't know. But if you ask a reverse question, which means that, sir, due to this particular benefit of my product, what is the value do you think that it will contribute to your process? Now, the customer cannot say no. He's bound to give you a figure, right? Or he might say no value. Well, if he says no value, then I go back to my sales process and I prove to him that there is a value. So when I ask a reverse question, कि sir, ये benefit के कारण मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि आपके प्रोसेस में 10% का फायदा होगा. एनीवे, मुझे लगने से कुछ नहीं होता, आपको क्या लगता है? और अगर मैं 10% बोलूंगा तो ग्राहक बोलेगा हाँ 2-3% का फायदा हो जाएगा. वेल, गुड, होल्ड ऑन देयर. 2-3% का फायदा हो जाएगा. So now you see, I asked a reverse question and the customer gave me a straight answer. Then my step number 2 is customer. So I ask a reverse question. Step number 1, customer answers changes his own opinion. Step number 2, then step number 3, continue till customer is positive about your offer and close. Now we call it engineered closing because one reverse question does not do the trick. So you will have to do a series of 3, 4, 5, 6 reverse questions. जब मेरे गुरुजी मुझे ये क्लोजिंग टेक्निक सिखा रहे थे तो उन्होंने एक बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग एग्जांपल लिया था और वो एग्जांपल मैं आपके सामने भी लेना चाहता हूँ. समय है हमारे पास. आप जब एक छोटा बच्चा पैदा होता है, ड्यूरिंग प्रेगनेंसी, व्हेन देयर इज अ नॉर्मल डिलीवरी, देयर आर टाइम्स व्हेन जब बच्चा उल्टा पैदा होता है, तो उस समय दाई बच्चे को पहले मार के सीधा करती है माँ के पेट में और फिर उसे पैदा करती है. right? So this engineered closing is all about making a crooked scenario straight and then going ahead with the closing, right? So typically, let me take a few scenarios. So if you're into life insurance selling, I'm just taking a typical scenario. And if the customer tells you that no, I have got enough life insurance policies with me and I don't think I need your product, then I ask a reverse question that sir, आप इतने ऐशो आराम से रह रहे हैं, तो अभी आपका स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ लिविंग देख के तो मुझे लगता है कि 2 लाख रुपया आपका मिनिमम खर्चा होता होगा. Am I right, sir? तो कस्टमर बोलता है नहीं यार 2 लाख नहीं, बट हाँ 1-8 लाख तो खर्चा हो जाता है. And then I get back that sir, in case of any eventuality today, do you think your family is going to earn 1 lakh per month on the basis of whatever investments you have done? Tak. You create a negative situation into a positive situation and the customer cannot say no or customer cannot say yes. All right. So that's a typical example of an engineered close. उल्टा सिचुएशन को रिवर्स क्वेश्चन पूछ के सीधा लाना है और फिर उसको डिलीवरी के तरफ ले जाना है, टैक्टिकली मैनोवर करना है. आई एम श्योर आपके जहन में बहुत सवाल उठ रहे होंगे और क्वेश्चन आंसर के लिए मैंने रखा है समय, so that I can answer your questions live. Let me quickly move on to the next technique, sell a dream close. Now this is a closing technique जहां हमें झूठ नहीं बोलना है दोस्तों. बहुत बार जब ड्रीम की बात होती है तो लोग बोलते हैं चलो झूठ बोलो, झूठी मनगढ़ंत कहानी बताओ. नो, आई एम नॉट एडवोकेटिंग मनगढ़ंत कहानी. आपको you have to create a dream for the customer based on truth. You have to help the customer visualize the future with you and your product and service. It's very interesting. I was conducting a training program for the refrigerator division of Godrej & Boyce. And we created a sell a dream close technique for the salespeople of Godrej & Boyce refrigerators. And we created a script where the salesman was taught that, sir, ये refrigerator लेके आपके kitchen के एकदम कोने में पड़ा रहेगा, ये सुंदर सा refrigerator, और जब आप इसकी refrigerator को खोलोगे तो आंख बंद करके भी राइट हैंड साइड में आपको बटर का काउंटर मिल जाएगा और आपकी ठंडी बियर ऊपर में होगी जिसमें 3 तरह के अलग खंडे हैं. So I'm just giving an example, friends. The salesman is trying to make the customer visualize कि जब आप गोदरेज का रेफ्रिजरेटर लेके अपने घर पे लगाओगे तो आपकी जिंदगी कैसे बदलने वाली है. And this is known as a sell a dream close technique. This technique is very well used by real estate people. This technique is very well used by finance consultants. This technique is very well used by automobile and car sales people. जब आपकी एग्जांपल लूंगा तो इस पे और चर्चा करूंगा. और मेरा आखिरी सेल्स क्लोजिंग टेक्निक है the hard sell close. You know, this is typically a scenario where a square peg is entering into a square hole. जब आपको पता है कि आपकी रिलेशनशिप ग्राहक के साथ स्ट्रांग है, अगर कोई पुराना ग्राहक है जिसको आप पिछले 10 साल 15 साल से सर्विस दे रहे हैं, एक अच्छी रिलेशनशिप बन गई है, तो हार्ड सेलिंग इज आल्सो वन ऑफ द क्लोजिंग ऑप्शन. अब मिसाल के तौर पे कस्टमर बोलता है कि संजय आप अच्छे हो, आप बोल रहे हो, मैं बात मान लेता हूं, लेकिन यार मैं इस ब्रांड का प्रोडक्ट नहीं खरीदूंगा क्योंकि इस ब्रांड की सर्विस अच्छी नहीं. Now, in that scenario, if I have a good relationship with the customer, I can do a hard sell and tell him that, boss, आप मुझे देखिए, आप मेरे ब्रांड को मत देखिए, आप मेरे प्रोडक्ट को मत देखिए, आप मुझे देखिए. अगर 15 साल से मैं आपको सर्विस देता आया हूं और एक बाल बाका नहीं हुआ, तो आज कैसे गलती कर लूंगा? कम से कम इस ट्रस्ट पे तो हम आगे बढ़ सकते हैं. Now, this is known as the hard sell closing, friends. So quickly speaking, revising, we started with the Ben Franklin close, where we said that your 50% is always heavier than the buyer's 50% truth, the pros and cons. We went to assumptive close, which we said it happens only with 20% of the cases. We went to gotcha closing, and this closing technique is very useful when you are able to squarely identify the risk assessment of the customer. The if-then closing, this happens very well when your negotiation exchange kit is in place. Then the engineered closing, where the salesperson has mastered the art of reverse closing, reverse questions, I'm sorry. and can tactically maneuver the closing. The next sales closing technique is sell a dream close. In this form of closing, the storytelling skills of the salesperson is very important. And then the last one was hard sell. And hard sell can only be done with people where you have a great relationship. Don't try to do a hard sell with an unknown acquaintance. Having said all these 7 different closing techniques, towards the end, I would like to tell you that please follow the principle of ABC, which stands for always be closing, because attitude is everything. So you can apply whichever technique you want. We have discussed 7 techniques and you can apply any of these 7 techniques for your sales closing. But towards the end, you must remember that you got to be in an always closing mode. You know, a lot of times I have seen salespeople who just who get so passionate about the product demonstration that they forget कि closing भी करना है मुझे. उनको ऐसा लगता है अभी तो मैं प्रोडक्ट दिखा रहा हूँ, अभी अच्छा खासा कहानी चल रहा है, अच्छी डिस्कशन हो रही है, कस्टमर मेरी इज्जत कर रहा है, चाय पानी पिला रहा है, अभी क्लोजिंग की बात नहीं करता हूँ, सारा कुछ बिगड़ जाएगा, क्लोजिंग की बात आखिरी में करूंगा. ऐसा कुछ आखिरी नहीं होता दोस्तों. हर बार कोई अच्छी चीज बताई, ग्राहक को पसंद आया, तुरंत सॉफ्ट क्लोजिंग कीजिए, क्योंकि ऐसा किसी भागवत गीता या कुरान में नहीं लिखा है कि जब तक 5 अच्छी चीजें नहीं बताओगे तब तक क्लोजिंग मत करना. ऐसा कहीं नहीं लिखा है. मैं एग्रेसिव सेल्स पर्सन हूँ, एक चीज बताता हूँ, ग्राहक को पसंद आया, ग्राहक अगर बोलता हाँ संजय ये अच्छा लगा, इमीडिएटली पार्ट क्लोजिंग करता हूँ और 3-4 पार्ट क्लोजिंग के बाद फाइनल क्लोजिंग करता हूँ. सो द एटीट्यूड ऑफ ऑलवेज बी क्लोजिंग इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फ्रेंड्स. We discussed 7 closing techniques. We discussed an attitude, which is very important for sales closing. Towards the end of this program, I want to thank all of you who took out your precious time to come to today's Sales Ki Pathshala and understood all the sales closing techniques.